Who repaired this watch? The question cut through the Saturday noise inside Bellwether Mercantile so cleanly that even the checker game beside the stove stopped. Caleb Hart stood at the counter with a silver pocket watch open in his palm. He was tall, sun-browned, and still carried 3 weeks of trail dust in the seams of his coat. The watch had belonged to his father. For 6 years, its second hand had jumped twice, shivered, and stopped. 2 watchmakers in Cheyenne had told him the mechanism was too worn to bother with. Now it was ticking. Not merely running, but keeping time with a soft, steady precision. Caleb had almost forgotten. Mr. Bellwether, the owner of the store, pushed himself up from his chair near the cash drawer. Something wrong with it? Several men turned to look. Caleb glanced from the watch to the storekeeper. Nothing wrong at all. That seemed to confuse everyone more. He lifted the watch closer to his ear. It hasn't run this smooth since I was a boy. I asked who repaired it. Mr. Bellwether opened his mouth, hesitated, then looked toward the back of the store. A young woman stood near a shelf of flour sacks, with a pencil tucked behind one ear. Caleb had noticed her when he came in, though only briefly. She was perhaps 24, with dark auburn hair pinned neatly beneath a plain, cream-colored scarf. Her blue-gray dress was modest and carefully mended at one cuff. Her face was striking, the sort of beauty that would have drawn attention in a ballroom, yet somehow inside Bellwether Mercantile she had become part of the shelves and counters, something people looked around rather than at. She held an inventory ledger against her chest. Mr. Bellwether gave an impatient wave in her direction. My niece did something with it. The young woman's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Something? Caleb repeated. The storekeeper shrugged. She likes fooling with little gears and springs. Her father taught her before he passed. I told her not to promise anything. Caleb looked at the woman. She looked back. There was no pride in her face, no expectation of praise, only caution. What's your name, miss? For a moment she seemed surprised he had asked her rather than her uncle. Lydia Mercer. Caleb placed the watch carefully on the counter between them. What did you do to it? Her uncle answered before she could. Cleaned it, most likely. Caleb did not turn toward him. His eyes remained on Lydia. She understood. The fourth wheel pivot was bent, she said quietly. Someone tried to straighten it once and weakened the shoulder. I reshaped a pin from an old mantel clock, polished it down, then fitted it into the plate. The mainspring was also catching. Caleb stared at her. Lydia mistook his silence for doubt. I can open it again if you'd like to see. No. Her shoulders stiffened. Then he smiled. It was not a broad smile. Caleb Hart was not a man known for those. But it was real. I believe you. Something changed in her face. Only slightly. A softening around the eyes. Caleb picked up the watch. My father carried this from Missouri to Wyoming Territory before there was much of a road between the two. Lydia glanced at the worn silver case. I saw the initials. Caleb looked down. C.H. His father's name had been Charles Hart. How much do I owe you? Mr. Bellwether stepped forward at once. $2 ought to. 50 cents, Lydia said. Her uncle frowned. Caleb looked from one to the other. 50? The replacement piece was scrap. The rest was cleaning. You spent 3 evenings on that thing, Mr. Bellwether said. Lydia's cheeks colored. That was my choice. Caleb placed $2 on the counter. Lydia shook her head. That is too much. No, he said. It isn't. The room had grown noisy again, but something about the moment felt private. Lydia looked at the money and then at him. I don't take charity. Good. Caleb closed the watch and slipped it into his vest. Neither do I give it. That evening, after the mercantile closed, Lydia counted the register beneath the weak yellow glow of 2 kerosene lamps. Her uncle had already gone upstairs. He had not mentioned the watch again. He had, however, taken one of the $2 Caleb left and placed it in the store till Lydia had watched him do it. She had said nothing. Silence had become a habit with her, not because she lacked thoughts. Lydia had more thoughts than most people she knew. She noticed which canned goods sold fastest before storms. She knew exactly how many sacks of flour the mining camps would buy once the mountain roads reopened. She could tell by a rancher's boots whether he had come to town to purchase supplies or borrow money. She had reorganized her uncle's accounts after arriving 3 years earlier and discovered that Bellwether Mercantile had been losing nearly $40 a month through poor inventory records. The store began making a profit by spring. Her uncle told everyone business had improved because he had finally figured out this town. Lydia let him. Before Bellwether, she had lived with her father in a narrow house behind a clock repair shop in Nebraska. Edwin Mercer had possessed patient hands and an endlessly curious mind. He taught his daughter to read before she was 5, fractions before she was 8, and the inner workings of a clock before she was 12. Her mother had died young. Her father had raised her among brass wheels, tiny screwdrivers, ledger books, and the calm tick of 100 clocks. He never once told Lydia that intelligence was unbecoming in a woman. The rest of the world proved less generous. After his death from pneumonia, the shop went to pay debts. Lydia had nowhere to go except Wyoming, where her mother's older brother owned a successful general store. Uncle Amos had given her a room. He had given her work. For that she remained grateful. But gratitude, she had learned, could slowly become a cage when everyone around you used it to remind you that you should ask for nothing more. 3 mornings after Caleb Hart collected his watch, Lydia saw him again. He entered just after sunrise while she was stacking jars of preserves near the front window. He removed his hat. "Morning, Miss Mercer." "Mr. Hart." She expected him to ask for tobacco or coffee. Instead, he held out a small brass compass. "The needle sticks." Lydia looked at it. "Have you dropped it?" "Horse did most of the dropping. I was attached to the horse at the time." She almost smiled. "Almost. Leave it with me." "How long?" "Tomorrow. I'm riding out this afternoon." "Then, noon." Caleb leaned one elbow on the counter. "You always work that fast?" "No." He waited. Lydia took the compass from him. "I work as fast as the thing requires." This time, he smiled first. By noon, the compass was repaired. A week later, he brought a broken saddle buckle, though Lydia pointed out that any blacksmith could have fixed it. "I know. Then why bring it here?" Caleb studied the row of coffee tins behind her as though the answer might be printed there. "Blacksmith talks too much." Lydia knew that was not the reason. She did not ask. Caleb worked at the Double Elm Ranch, 12 miles north of town. He had ridden cattle for most of his adult life and recently accepted a position as foreman after the previous man left for Oregon. The ranch belonged to an aging widower named Jonas Reed, who had 2,000 acres, 600 cattle, and almost no patience for paperwork. That autumn, Caleb found himself riding into Bellwether more often than necessary. At first, he told himself he needed supplies, then nails, then lamp oil, then coffee. Despite the fact that the ranch kitchen already had nearly 20 pounds, old Jonas noticed. "You planning to drink us through winter?" Caleb looked at the sacks stacked in the pantry. "What?" "Coffee. We were low. We could keep half of Montana awake with what you bought." Caleb said nothing. Jonas chuckled. Caleb returned to town 3 days later. He began to notice things about Lydia. Not the obvious things. He knew she was beautiful. Any man with eyes would know that. What interested him were the other things. She remembered every customer's account without checking the ledger. She could add a column of numbers faster than Amos could find his spectacles. When a frightened young mother came into the store, unable to pay for fever medicine, Lydia quietly deducted the cost from wages her uncle had not yet paid her. When an elderly rancher tried to order seed that would never survive the local frost, she persuaded him to buy a hardier variety. When a child broke a music box in the aisle and began crying, Lydia knelt beside him, repaired the spring, then told Amos the mechanism had already been loose. The boy left smiling. Lydia received no thanks. Most days, no one seemed to notice anything she did. Caleb did. And once he began noticing, he found it difficult to stop. Lydia noticed him too. He was different from the men who usually entered the store. He did not fill silence simply because it existed. He waited when she spoke. He never called her girl, though Amos often did. He asked questions and listened to the answers. One afternoon, a gust of winter wind rattled the front window so hard that one of the glass panes nearly slipped from its frame. Lydia placed a folded piece of paper in the gap. By the following morning, the frame had been repaired. She stared at the new wooden brace. "Uncle?" Amos glanced up. "What? Did you fix the window?" He laughed. "Do I look like a carpenter?" Lydia said nothing. An hour later, Caleb entered. Snow dusted the shoulders of his coat. He looked at the window once. Only once. Lydia understood. "Thank you." "For what?" "The window." He picked up a tin of nails and examined it with great seriousness. Looked cold. It was. "That settles it." He carried the nails to the counter. The next time Caleb came in, Lydia had already set aside the particular brand of coffee he preferred. Neither mentioned it. Their acquaintance grew in such small exchanges. A pencil sharpened and left beside the ledger. A loose stirrup strap stitched before Caleb realized it was tearing. A new hook installed beside the stove because Lydia's coat always ended up draped over a flour barrel. An extra cup of coffee placed near Caleb when he arrived half-frozen from a January ride. Nothing anyone else would call courtship. Yet both of them felt the shape of something forming. Caleb became aware of it slowly. Lydia understood it sooner and trusted it less. She had known men who admired a pretty face. She had known men who liked the idea of an intelligent woman until she disagreed with them. Caleb did neither. He seemed interested in the workings of her mind. That frightened her more than flattery would have. Flattery was easy to dismiss. Being understood was dangerous. By late January, business slowed. Snow buried the North Road. Freight wagons arrived less frequently. Fewer ranch hands came to town. One night, Lydia remained downstairs after closing, checking figures by lamplight. Something was wrong. She had noticed it 2 weeks earlier. The amount Amos owed their freight supplier was increasing faster than the inventory arriving. She recalculated the totals. Then again, on the third attempt, she found the pattern. Several invoices had been altered. Small amounts. $5 here, $8 there. Enough to escape notice. Over 6 months, more than $170 had disappeared. For Bellwether Mercantile, it was significant. The following morning, Lydia showed her uncle. Amos barely glanced at the pages. "You've made a mistake." "I have not." His eyes hardened. "You calling Mr. Dugan a thief?" "I'm saying the invoices do not match the goods received. That man has supplied me for 12 years. Then either his clerk is making errors or someone is changing the numbers." Amos closed the ledger. "Leave business to me." Lydia stared at him. "I keep the business." "You keep numbers." "The numbers are the business." The words escaped before she could stop them. Silence filled the back office. Amos's face changed. Not with rage. Something colder. "You've become too sure of yourself." Lydia lowered her voice. "I am trying to protect the store. My store." She looked at him. That was the moment she understood. Nothing she did would ever make the work partly hers. Not the years. Not the accounts she repaired. Not the customers she kept. Not the money she saved. She was still a dependent niece who should be grateful for a bed. Amos pushed the ledger aside. "Winter's slow. Starting next month, I'll cut your wages by half." Lydia went very still. "You already owe me 6 weeks. You have room and board. I work from before sunrise until after closing, and you have nowhere else to be." Neither of them heard the bell above the front door. Caleb had entered carrying a crate of horseshoe nails. Jonas asked him to exchange. He stopped near the stove. The office door stood slightly open. He heard every word. "You can also stop wasting time repairing trinkets," Amos continued. "Customers come here for supplies, not to encourage foolish hobbies." Lydia felt as though he had struck something deeper than pride. "My father's work was not foolish." "I didn't say it was." "You did." Amos sighed impatiently. "This is exactly what I mean. Too sensitive, too proud. You're fortunate I took you in." Caleb closed his eyes. He had seen cattle suffer under cruel men. He had seen drifters cheated of wages. He knew anger. but the feeling rising in him now was quieter and harder. He left before either of them saw him. Lydia worked the rest of the day. She measured flour, balanced accounts, helped customers. No one knew anything had happened. That evening she climbed the narrow stairs to her room and opened the small wooden case beneath her bed. Inside were her father's tools, tiny files, pliers, brass tweezers, 3 screwdrivers, a magnifying lens, and one unfinished watch movement Edwin Mercer had been working on the week he became ill. Lydia sat on the edge of the bed and held it in her hand. For 3 years, she had told herself that survival was enough. A room was enough. Work was enough. Safety was enough. Now she wondered when exactly she had stopped believing she deserved anything beyond enough. At the Double Elm, Caleb did not sleep. The ranch house was quiet except for the stove settling and the wind running beneath the eaves. Jonas found him at the kitchen table near midnight. "You look like a man arguing with himself." Caleb stared into a cold cup of coffee. "Need someone to manage the supply accounts?" Jonas blinked. "At midnight? Do we?" Jonas lowered himself into a chair. "We need someone to keep me from losing every receipt I touch. Could use someone who knows inventory?" "Certainly. Someone who can repair clocks." Jonas frowned. "How many clocks you planning to break?" Caleb leaned back. Jonas studied him for several seconds. Then the old rancher smiled. "This about the mercantile woman? Her name's Lydia." Caleb gave him a warning look. Jonas ignored it. "What can she do?" "Accounts, inventory, repairs. Seems to understand supply prices better than Bellwether does. Probably smarter than both of us. Not difficult in my case." "I'm serious." "So am I." Jonas rubbed his beard. "We lost money last year because I ordered winter feed twice and forgot I'd already paid for the first shipment." Caleb remembered. Everyone remembered. Jonas continued. "I could pay $35 a month. Room in the small east cottage. Separate. Respectable." Caleb said nothing. "Would she come?" "I don't know." Jonas leaned forward. "You offering her a job or proposing marriage?" "A job." "Shame." Caleb stood. "I'm going to bed." Of course. He was at Bellwether Mercantile before opening. Lydia unlocked the front door and found him standing in the pale morning cold. "Mr. Hart? I need to speak with you." Her expression became guarded. He hated that. "Not here." She glanced upstairs. "Then where?" "The churchyard." That surprised her enough that she almost laughed. "No one goes there in this weather." "Exactly." They walked 2 blocks through fresh snow. The little white church sat at the edge of town, its yard empty beneath bare cottonwoods. Caleb stopped beside the fence. For a man who could give orders during a stampede without hesitation, he suddenly found words difficult. Lydia waited. "I heard your uncle yesterday." Color rose in her face. She looked away. "I wasn't listening on purpose." "That somehow makes it better?" "No." A tiny breath of amusement escaped her. It gave him courage. Double Elm needs someone to manage the ranch accounts and supplies. Her eyes returned to him. "Since when?" "Since Jonas Reed finally admitted he's terrible at both." "Mr. Hart." "Caleb." She became still. He continued. "The job is real. $35 a month. Your own cottage. You would handle purchasing, inventory, payroll records, correspondence. Jonas needs someone who can think ahead." "You told him about me?" "Yes." Why?" The question was not suspicious. It was almost frightened. Caleb looked at her. "Because I know what you can do." Lydia's throat tightened. No one had ever said those words to her. Not since her father died. Caleb kept speaking because he feared silence might change her answer. "There's an old workroom beside the ranch office. Good north window. Jonas says you can use it however you like. For accounts, for your tools." She stared at him. He had remembered. Caleb swallowed. "You wouldn't owe me anything. This isn't a favor. The ranch needs the work done, and you're better qualified than anyone I know." Lydia looked toward the white hills beyond town. "What if I fail?" Caleb answered immediately. "Then you fail at something you chose." She looked at him again. He lowered his voice. "But I don't think you will." The snow fell softly around them. Lydia thought of the upstairs room, the unpaid wages, the endless ledgers signed with her uncle's name. She thought of her father's tools beneath the bed. "Would I be allowed to order supplies without asking permission each time?" Caleb smiled. "That would be the point." "And the cottage has a stove? A good one. Roof leak?" "Not anymore." "You repaired it." He shrugged. "It needed repairing." Lydia's mouth curved. A real smile this time. Caleb forgot what he intended to say next. "I need 2 days," she said. His heart sank, though he hid it. To decide? To pack. Lydia left Bellwether Mercantile with 1 trunk, 2 books, a sewing basket, and the wooden case containing her father's tools. Her uncle did not stop her. He did not apologize either. At the door, Amos simply said, "You'll find ranch life harder than you think." Lydia looked around the store she had kept running for 3 years. "Perhaps," she picked up her case, "but I would rather be tired from building my own life than comfortable living someone else's." Caleb drove the wagon. They traveled beneath a sky so clear and blue that the snow seemed to shine. The east cottage at Double Elm was smaller than Lydia imagined. It was also hers. She stood in the center of the single main room, staring at the clean table, iron stove, narrow bed, and window facing the mountains. On one wall, Caleb had installed a long wooden shelf. Beneath the window stood a workbench. Lydia touched it. "This wasn't here before." "No. When did you build it?" "Yesterday." She turned. "Yesterday?" He shifted uncomfortably. "North Light's better for small work." Lydia looked at the bench again. There were moments when gratitude felt too large for words. So she used the language they both understood. That evening, when Caleb returned to the bunkhouse, he found his father's watch on his pillow. For one terrible second, he thought Lydia had given it back. Then he saw the small folded note. The case hinge had been loose. "It will hold now." L.M. Caleb sat on the edge of the bunk and smiled. Life at Double Elm changed gradually. Then, all at once. Within a month, Lydia reorganized the supply house. By spring, she discovered the ranch was paying 3 different freight rates for identical shipments. She renegotiated 2 contracts. She created a system for tracking feed, medicine, tack, and payroll. Jonas walked into the office one morning, stared at the shelves, and announced that he could finally find things he had not known he owned. Lydia laughed. The sound stopped Caleb in the doorway. He had heard her laugh before, but rarely. Here it came more easily. She began wearing brighter dresses, not expensive ones, a soft green, a deep blue, colors that did not seem chosen to disappear. The ranch hands respected her because she was fair. She never spoke down to them. She also never allowed them to fool her. When one young cowboy claimed he had lost a receipt for a saddle blanket, Lydia calmly produced the duplicate from her files. "Miss Mercer," he said, defeated, "you frighten me." "You'll recover." Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. Their affection deepened in ordinary hours. He brought her mail from town. She kept a jar of salve for the cuts he ignored. He repaired the gate outside her cottage. She replaced the cracked crystal in his father's watch. They sometimes sat on her porch after supper, saying little. The silence had changed. Once, silence had protected Lydia from the world. With Caleb, it connected her to it. Spring brought trouble with the thaw. A late storm melted quickly in the foothills, sending water into dry Willow Creek. The creek fed the low pasture where more than 200 cattle had been moved. Caleb was preparing men to drive the herd uphill when Lydia arrived at the ranch office with a map. "You can't take the north crossing." He looked up. "Why?" "The freight survey from last year." She spread the map across the desk. "The bank washed out near Miller's Bend. The ground underneath is shale." Jonas frowned. "That crossing's been used 20 years. Not with this much water." Caleb studied the map. "How do you know?" "I compared the survey notes with the snowmelt records from the territorial report." Jonas blinked. "You read those?" Lydia pointed farther west. "Take the herd through Cottonwood Ridge. Adds 4 miles. It also keeps them out of the creek. Caleb trusted her. He changed the route. 2 days later, they learned the north crossing had collapsed. Had the herd entered there, cattle and men could have been lost. The ranch hands spoke about Lydia differently after that, not as the woman who kept the books, as Miss Mercer, the woman who had seen what everyone else missed. Caleb felt proud of her. Lydia felt something more important, useful. Not quietly useful in a back room, not useful so someone else could claim the credit. Scene. Summer settled over Double Elm. Wildflowers covered the hills. The cattle grew fat on high grass. And Caleb Hart remained, to Lydia's increasing frustration, one of the slowest men in Wyoming where matters of the heart were concerned. Everyone at the ranch knew. Jonas knew. The ranch hands knew. Even the boy who delivered mail from town seemed to know. Only Caleb behaved as though their attachment were some unexplained weather pattern. Then, in August, a letter arrived. It was addressed to Lydia. The handwriting belonged to Amos Bellwether. She opened it at her desk. Her uncle had discovered the freight fraud. The supplier's clerk had been altering invoices for nearly a year. Amos wrote that Lydia had been right. The letter contained an apology of sorts, though most of it was hidden beneath explanations. At the bottom was another sentence. "Business is not the same without you." Lydia read it twice. For years she had imagined what it would feel like to hear him admit she mattered. Now that the words had come, they did not give her what she expected. She folded the letter. Caleb found her sitting outside her cottage that evening. "You all right?" my uncle wrote. He sat beside her. She handed him the letter. Caleb read it. "He wants you back. He wants the store fixed. Do you want to go?" Lydia looked toward the mountains. The question hurt more than she expected. Not because she wanted Bellwether. Because part of her feared Caleb might expect her to leave. "I don't know." It was not entirely true. Caleb nodded slowly. "You should choose what you want." Her heart sank. "That's all?" He looked confused. "What else should there be?" Lydia stood. "Nothing." She took the letter and went inside. Caleb sat alone on the porch for several minutes. Then Jonas appeared from behind the barn. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." Caleb frowned. Jonas shook his head. "I have watched bulls with better instincts. She has a decision to make. So do you. This isn't about me." Jonas laughed. "That is exactly your problem." Caleb stared at the cottage door. Jonas became serious. "You gave that young woman a place where she could become herself. Good thing. Honorable thing." Caleb said nothing. "But somewhere along the way, she became home to you." Caleb looked at him. The old rancher shrugged. "Everyone knows except the two people involved." That night, Caleb took his father's watch from his vest. He opened the case. The mechanism Lydia repaired months before continued its steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Time moving, whether a man was brave enough to move with it or not. Before sunrise, Caleb went to the workshop. Lydia woke to hammering. By breakfast, it had stopped. She spent the morning packing no bags, though Caleb did not know that. At noon, there was a knock. She opened the door. Caleb stood outside. In his hands was a wooden box, plain pine, strong corners, a brass clasp. He handed it to her. "What is this?" "Open it." Inside were narrow fitted compartments lined with dark cloth, spaces for files, tweezers, screwdrivers, pliers, every one of her father's tools. Lydia touched the edge of the box. Caleb's voice was rough. "I made it for the workbench." She looked up. "I thought you wanted me to decide freely." "I do." "Then why?" "Because I realized I've been hiding behind that." He removed his hat. For once, Caleb Hart did not look calm. "I told myself respecting your choice meant saying nothing about mine." Lydia could hear her own heartbeat. He continued, "I want you to stay." Her eyes filled. Caleb stepped closer. "Not because the ranch needs your books." Another step. "Not because Jonas needs someone to stop him ordering feed twice." From somewhere near the barn came a distant, offended shout. Caleb ignored it. I want you here because every place feels emptier when you're not in it. Lydia gripped the wooden box. Caleb looked almost angry with himself now, as if frustrated that language could not carry what he had spent months proving in other ways. I don't know how to say this prettily. Then don't. He took a breath. Build your life wherever you choose. His voice softened. But if you can imagine building it with me, I would spend the rest of mine trying to deserve that. Lydia stood very still. Then she laughed through her tears. Caleb blinked. Was that terrible? It was very, Caleb. I'm not sure what that means. It means it took you nearly a year. He stared at her. Then she set the toolbox down. I wrote my uncle this morning. Caleb's face changed. What did you say? That I forgave him. He waited. And? That I wasn't coming back. Hope appeared in his eyes so openly that Lydia wondered how she had ever believed this man unreadable. She stepped closer. I already chose. This time, Caleb kissed her. It was not elegant. His hat nearly fell. Lydia laughed again, and somewhere behind the barn, several ranch hands began cheering until Jonas ordered them back to work while cheering louder than any of them. They married in October. Lydia wore deep blue. Caleb wore the same silver watch his father had carried west. Jonas stood beside him. The ranch hands filled 3 rows of borrowed chairs. Amos Bellwether came from town. He stood awkwardly near the back until Lydia walked to him before the ceremony. For a moment, neither knew what to say. Then Amos held out a small wrapped parcel. Inside was the old brass nameplate from her father's shop, Edwin Mercer, clock and watch repair. I kept it, he said. Lydia touched the worn letters. Her uncle looked older than she remembered. I should have listened to you. Yes, she said. He almost smiled. I suppose I deserve that. Yes. Then Lydia embraced him. Forgiveness, she had learned, did not require returning to the place that wounded you. Sometimes forgiveness meant carrying no bitterness as you continued forward. Caleb built a larger workshop beside their house the following spring. A painted sign hung above the door. Lydia Hart, timepieces and precision repair. Travelers began bringing watches from 50 miles away. Ranchers brought broken clocks. Railroad men brought chronometers. One winter, Lydia repaired the station clock from the new rail depot, a mechanism 3 men had declared beyond saving. At Double Elm, she continued managing the accounts. Caleb continued pretending he understood her filing system. He did not. 7 years passed. The ranch expanded. Jonas retired to a smaller house nearby, though he appeared at supper so often no one considered him retired from anything. Caleb and Lydia eventually bought 40 acres along Cottonwood Ridge. Their house stood beneath 2 elm trees. There were children now, a daughter named Emma, who took apart a kitchen timer at age 5 and successfully reassembled most of it, a son named Charles, who preferred horses and regarded clocks with deep suspicion. On winter evenings, Lydia worked at her bench while Caleb read nearby. The house filled with small sounds, firewood settling, children breathing, tools touching brass, and the steady ticking of clocks. One evening, Emma climbed onto her father's knee and pointed to the silver watch in his hand. Did Mama fix that? Caleb looked across the room. Lydia was adjusting the balance wheel of a railroad watch beneath her lamp. She did. Was it broken bad? Very. Emma considered this. Is that why you married her? Lydia glanced up. Caleb smiled. No. Why then? He looked at his wife. Years had passed, but sometimes he could still see the young woman standing behind the counter at Bellwether Mercantile, waiting for criticism because experience had taught her not to expect praise. He remembered the question he had asked. Who repaired this watch? At the time, he thought he was asking about a machine. He understood now that the watch had been the first thread connecting 2 lives. Your mother noticed things other people missed, Caleb said. Lydia's eyes softened. Emma frowned thoughtfully. But you noticed Mama. Caleb became quiet. Lydia stopped working. Their daughter had said in 6 words what had taken them years to understand. Yes, Caleb said at last. I did. Later, after the children were asleep, Lydia joined him on the porch. The Wyoming night stretched wide and clear above them. Caleb opened his father's watch. It still kept perfect time. "Running slow?" Lydia asked. "Not a second." "Then why are you checking it?" "Habit." She leaned against him. He closed the case. For a while they watched the stars without speaking. Their life had not been built through one grand rescue. Caleb had not saved Lydia. She had never needed saving in the way people imagined. She had needed room, respect, a door someone would open without expecting gratitude for the rest of her life. Caleb had given her an opportunity. Lydia had transformed it through her own intelligence, courage, and work. And she had given him something in return, a reason to stop drifting, a home measured not in acres but in attention, in remembering what mattered to another person, in repairing what could be repaired, in recognizing when something precious had been overlooked simply because it had been quiet. For years, Lydia had believed invisibility was safer than disappointment. Then one tired cowboy walked into a frontier store carrying a broken watch. He noticed the careful work of her hands. Then he noticed the mind behind them. Then the woman. And once he truly saw her, he could never again understand how everyone else had managed to look past her. The watch continued ticking between them, steady, patient, faithful, just like the life they had built, one small act of attention at a time. Sometimes the most meaningful kind of love begins with simply paying attention. Lydia did not need someone to rescue her. She needed room to use her gifts, and Caleb cared enough to notice. In real life, we can do the same. Listen closely, respect quiet strengths, and make space for people to become more fully themselves. A little recognition, offered sincerely, can help someone feel at home. A small note for you. This story was created and fictionalized by AI for your entertainment, while also sharing a positive life lesson about kindness, respect, and truly seeing the people around us.